So, Fila Antwine, I'm so happy to have you here. Excited to chat with you today. Thank you so much for joining me as we talk about sacred self-care.
My pleasure. I'm super excited today. So yeah, this will be
Yes, excellent. Everybody, we have to admit, we're very excited because these are our last meetings of the
good.
day. So if
Exactly.
you see us smiling and giddy, it's because we're thinking about what we're going to do after. But
Yes,
how we're going to practice self-care after this.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So I want to tell you a little bit about Phyla before we start. Let me go over here and tell you that she is a self-love and healthy relationships coach. She's coached over 500 women and a few men
Yes.
individually and in groups, in person and virtually. She's been hired by national organizations, colleges, and universities to share her coaching principles with their members, students, and staff. And she's been featured in major media outlets, honored by members of Congress, and seen on Emmy Award winning TV. So, again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure. That makes me sound fancy.
You fancy, you so fancy. I know. When people read my stuff, I'm like, who are you talking about? That's
Right.
me. Excellent. So let's start off by talking about self-care. Well, first, I didn't realize this until I talked to my vision coach actually this morning that today is
Mhm.
the new moon, the start of the new moon, a new season, if you will. I'll let you explain new moon, a new
Yeah.
season, if you will. But just this idea she mentioned of radical self-care. And I told her I'm
Mm.
having a conversation tonight about self-care. So I want to hear from you. How do you define self-care?
So it's important, I think, for us to start with what self care is not, right?
Mhm.
Because we have a misconception that anything that's self indulgent is self care, and that's not the case. So for me, it's not just about self care, but it's about sacred self care. So it's about doing those things that impact you internally in a way that you get to reflect the joy, the happiness, the goodness externally. It's about taking care of yourself on a daily basis, the way that you speak to yourself, the way that you show up in your life, the way that you relate to others. And then from that point, you're able to break it down into what I like to call those simple but sacred self care steps that I talk about.
Tell us about the way that you speak to yourself. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't realize the conversation you're having, even if it's just in your head or
Hmm.
loud, certainly if it's allowed, but even if it's just in your head, is one of the most powerful conversations.
It is the most powerful conversation. I share with my clients and I do my best to embody it in my own life, but I believe that the way that we best honor God, honor the universe, honor whatever divine spiritual force you believe in is by honoring yourself, right? You are the God in your own life. And so the way that you speak to yourself internally is the seed that you're planting every single day about who you get to be in the world, what you get to have in the world. And often we're having these negative internal conversations because it's just the way that we've been conditioned, right? And more often than not, it's not even your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's mom, dad, sister, brother, teachers, television, society, etc. So one of the things that I always recommend as part of the sacred self-care trifecta is to really make sure that you're taking intentional time consistently to realize what's going on internally, to just observe your own thoughts about yourself without judgment, but so you can just get an awareness of what you're saying to yourself on a daily basis.
So, how do you do that? Do we do that like with a daily sort of check in, or is it in the moment when I'm saying something that I might feel, negative, or maybe I'm not even aware that it's negative or impacting me in the ways that you say? But how do we do
Mhm.
those check ins?
So there's a number of ways to do them. What I believe is probably the most effective and the simplest forms are either meditation or journaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we get into a still place and we're able to quiet all of the chatter that's going on, you really have an opportunity to feel what's happening internally, and those negative thoughts, they're going to pop up, but you get to observe them, right, from a position outside of yourself. I also am an advocate of journaling because it allows you to take what's in your head and what's in your heart and put it on paper, right? You bring it into this 3D reality and now you get to see it and you can process it. And so those really simple ways are some of the tips that I give to my clients about how on a daily basis or at least consistently you get to check in and see what's going on internally and what's happening in that conversation.
And I know one of the things that you have is a sacred self love, self care planner.
Yes, I
Yes,
do. I
yes.
do. I actually have one right here. Let me
Oh,
just show
show
you
me, show me, show me.
how pretty it
How
is, right? How pretty
pretty.
it is.
Yes, we love it. Oh,
The planner,
beautiful.
thank you. The planner is it's really a compact coaching guide.
Mhm.
It was born out of a need that I saw with my private clients after they had finished coaching with me and you done programs. I wanted them to be able to have something that would be a reminder and that would kind of be like a coach on the go. So there's a section inside for you to think about what you're feeling, for you to write what you're feeling today, and it gives you options to choose from. There's a section for visualization, for you to choose whatever self-care tool you want to use that day: manifestation, meditation, visualization, etc. And there's also space in there for you to journal, and there are prompts to help you get those juices going and flowing so you can start writing those things down and writing them out.
I love that. And it's funny, I was going to ask you about prompts because I just recently have gotten into journals with prompts. I mean, I've been writing in a journal since I'm 16. We probably talked about this. So just, and by journal, I mean a composition notebook. You know,
Yeah.
now I have the fancy journals like your sacred self-care planner and all those good things. But I've been getting more into journals that have prompts and just things to sort of, and by prompts, everyone, of course, we mean things to help you, prompts to help you think about a certain part of your day or how you're feeling and those kinds of things. So
Mhm.
Maya, Jennifer, Janine, thank you all for joining us. Maya asked a great
Yay.
question. How can I
Sure.
get one?
So you can get one from my site, filaantwine.com. You can order them right there, and they generally ship within 2 to 3 business days. They're in the restock process right now because they
They
sold
sold
out during
out.
the launch period, but they're
Mhm.
going to be restocked within the next 7 to 10 business days.
But in the meantime, you do have, since I was going to talk about this at the end, everybody, but you know, we got to talk about it now because clearly people are
That's
like, that's
all
great.
right.
How do I get it?
Yes.
The deck, you also have an affirmation deck
I
that just came
do.
out.
I do have the affirmation deck, which just launched like last week. And again, these were experimental things because I saw a need just with my client base and then realized that more women in my audience wanted them. And the affirmation deck, which I also have
Let's
here,
see those.
right?
Nice.
They
Run
are
it
so
across the
pretty. Let
screen
me
for
see.
us. There you go. There
Here
we go.
we
There we go.
go. Here we
Nice.
go. So they're
Beautiful.
beautiful. And then they have, the affirmations on
Affirmation.
the other side. And this was also something that I saw a need for in my own life and with clients. Like sometimes you really just need a grounding mechanism to help you recenter and refocus. And so the
Mhm.
affirmation deck allows you to just tune in to the space, whatever space you're in, pick a card, and that becomes your mantra or your affirmation for that day. And I'm a firm believer that energy plays a really huge part in what we do. So you always get exactly what you need from the deck.
So how, meaning whatever card you pull is what you needed in that moment.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So
Almost every day I do it for myself.
really, and
Yeah.
deck of affirmation decks is something that I just got into. You're my new Louise Hay. I'm just gonna say it. I'm like, I swear, just recently after visiting Hay House, actually, I'm like, what are all this spirituality that's going on up in here? But she has still a love yourself deck. But this is the
Hmm.
same kind of thing that another way for us to be and is this an example, I should say, or ask, of self care? Even having a deck or pulling cards or doing, of course, we talked about writing in a journal, but say I just need something before I go out the door. Could the self care card affirmation deck be something that helps me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. I'm all about keeping it simple. The
Right.
simplicity of self care is what will allow us to make it a lifestyle and a practice. And I talk about living a sacred self care lifestyle. It's where you are taking care of yourself in the smallest of ways, but they're having such a large impact on your life, right? So
Hmm.
let's say it's a crazy morning and you're scattered and you're off to meetings or work or with the kids, and you just take 3 minutes, right, to breathe, focus, and pick a card. That simple act now stays with you for the rest of the day. And whenever you feel off balance or off center, all you have to do is tune back into that affirmation and it can help you recenter and rebalance.
Would you say, even, I just thought about this, making it up because it's probably something I'm going to do when I get my cards from you, but taking a picture of the card and having it with you for the day, to
I
be able to look at it and to remind yourself of it.
Girl, I do.
You do?
I
Oh,
do.
see, okay,
I
I knew
do.
that.
If I'm in the house, the
Mhm.
card that I've chosen goes on display. So it's usually on my bookcase with the deck, and then the affirmation that I've chosen goes face up so I can see it every
See
time
it.
I come into the room, every time I come into the space. And when I leave the house, I just take my phone and take a screenshot. So anytime I'm feeling frazzled throughout the day or just want to tune in to some calm or peace or whatever, I pull out the phone and I take a look at it.
That's right. So would you say that women like, well, I won't project this on any of y'all. I'll say women like me, right? Sometimes we think self-care. I was going to name everybody here who I know is an ambitious woman, but just, sometimes I think we think I don't have time for self-care, or to your point, self-care has to be, or just is complicated. You mentioned some simple things, but how can we even get out of that mindset of thinking this is what it has to look like, or that it's going to be too complicated for me to, or even not too complicated. Sometimes it's just too time consuming.
Yeah.
Going to the spa is, and I have girlfriends who actually hate the spa. I think they're crazy, but they hate the spa. It's not for everyone. It doesn't have to look the same, in other words.
Yeah.
How can we get through that mindset?
So I think it first comes from recognizing that as ambitious women, we are operating in a highly masculine environment, right? So because of that, we take on a lot more masculinity than we would in our traditional areas of genius, right? You are great at what you do, but you have to maneuver through this space because it wasn't intended for you or designed for you as a woman to begin with. So recognizing that, I think it allows us to get away from the thought process or the idea that you cannot be ambitious and take care of yourself. You cannot be ambitious and take rest. You cannot be successful and have time for play. So you get to remember that there needs to be a healthy balance, because you don't want to be, as they say, a public success and a private failure, right? On the surface, you look good, you're good on paper, you're in the office doing all these things, but then behind closed doors, you start falling apart because, like you say, we don't recognize that support is sexy and we don't know how to ask for help. So first, recognizing that you're operating in an environment that was not designed for you. So that means that you get to bring in whatever you need. Secondly, allowing yourself to live in a space of knowing that you can be successful, you can be ambitious, and you can also take care of yourself. And then getting into a simple yet sacred practice that works for you. For some women, that is simply getting up to watch the sunrise, right? Because it stills them and calms them. For some of us, it may be yoga and swimming and Pilates, because that physical adrenaline and energy helps to calm your body and really balances the chemicals and hormones in your body. For me, I start my day every morning with meditation. Like, I sit up in the bed, I don't do anything else. I put the earplugs in and I meditate. And I usually do a guided meditation. And that keeps me grounded for the entire day. When I don't do it, you know.
Mommy, or your kids like, Mommy didn't meditate today.
Right, exactly.
Right.
My husband is like, you need me to give you some quiet time? You need to
right. Do you need to go meditate? Do you need to go to your corner?
Right. And so it's really about creating it as a practice for you, as a spiritual practice, as a sacred practice, where it fits you, fits your lifestyle, and implements easily into what's already in existence there.
Beautiful. Now, everyone, if you have a question, ladies, please, someone said, I need that. If you all have any questions, please drop them in here. We'll see the comments and we'll make sure to ask the questions. And as far as the links, I'll make sure for Fila, we have links in the comments. I'll update it after, so you'll see those there as well, for the deck, which I know you all want, and the journal, which will be restocked soon. So another question I have for you is, why is self-care sometimes the first thing, say if we are in a self-care practice, or we are, doing the meditation, and again, guilty, meditation and all these things, but then it's like, well, I'm busy now. It's the first thing we abandon. Is there some mental block for us as women, ambitious women, that might be the case, that, the self-care practices are the first thing we abandon as opposed to some other things?
I think yes, right? As women, we've received this messaging that in order to be a good woman, you have to self-sacrifice, right? And if you're already ambitious, that kind of is a negative in a lot of ways to your like femininity and womanhood. And so it seems as if I don't want to stop and also take care of myself, right? Because I need to do this thing and make sure that my career is going well. And then I think it's also that we feel like we don't have enough time to
Mm-hmm.
take care of ourselves. But when in actuality, when you slow down, time slows down with you. So when you
Right.
pour into yourself, life opens up to give you more. Um, I've heard, for many years that the person who doesn't have 10 minutes to meditate is the one who needs to meditate
The
most.
most, right.
Yeah. And
Tell
so
us,
I
say that
really
again.
believe
I have to
that.
hear that again. I don't know. Somebody needs to hear that again, girl. Listen,
Right?
I'm about to start crying. You preaching. When
Listen,
you
if you
slow
don't,
down.
when you slow down, time slows down with you. And when you
Mhm.
decide to pour into yourself, life opens up to give you more.
You better put that on an affirmation card.
Right?
If it's not already, that is good.
That's
I'm telling you.
achievable. Yeah.
Yes, that's amazing. And I think there's sometimes, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. Sometimes there's a fear of slowing down, sort of a, say, especially, I think, especially when things are going great, career wise, business
Mm,
wise, even in your personal life, relationship, whatever, you feel like I got to keep this momentum going. I'm
yeah.
always, something else I want to ask you about too is us being conscious of language. Not only we talked about what we say to ourselves, but just I'm very conscious of telling other women, you're making it happen, or you can make it, just this make it happen idea. And I know there's nothing, it's a completely innocuous term, but I just don't want to be pushing that message of you have to make this happen. Otherwise,
Mhm.
so just being in a space for me, more feminine space, not masculine, not the driver, being more of a, you create the space for this to happen
Yeah.
and then allow it to happen. But would you say that you found, even working with some clients, that there might be some fear in the slowing down, or the fear in the stopping, or the fear in putting yourself first, because it might mean something else will go away?
Absolutely. And that ultimately comes from having a lack mentality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And not believing that there's enough for you to take a break, slow down, take care of yourself, and show up. And the opportunity, the access will still
Still
be
be
there,
there.
will still be there. And for so many of us, we become ambitious because we feel like there's not enough, because we don't believe that we're supposed to have access. So we go harder and we do more and we push through, right? And I had a conversation with a friend one time, and she's a white woman. And so we were talking about the differences between successful white women and Black women. And it was something really simple in the conversation that I said, but girl, we got to push through. And she was like, no, you don't have to push through. You can just flow through. And I
Oh,
was like, uh,
right. Right.
you're right. Right. So we are in this space of pushing through, which means that we're showing up with the expectation that there are going to be barriers there. And so I feel like if I slow down, because I'm working so hard now, if I slow down, there may be more barriers, there'll be less access. And when I get there, maybe there won't be anything left for me. And so we really get to shift that mindset and start operating from a more just awareness of abundance. And in slowing down, that's really what you're retraining your brain to believe. There are mornings when I have a meeting or maybe like an event, and I'll feel a little frazzled, and I'll say, okay, Fila, slow down, stop. Because the more that you run, the further away things will become, and you'll have to run faster. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It makes
Yeah.
sense. It's hard to hear, but it makes sense. Too much sense. Too much sense. So Maya asked a question. Thank you, Maya. Maya said, what if I'll put it up here. What if you're the opposite, excuse me, where you're meditating to the point of isolation?
I don't know that that's meditating, right? Because to meditate simply means to become still and to tune in, not to tune out, not to disconnect, but to connect deeper. So I would ask what meditation looks like for you, right? How do you get into that space? How do you prepare? And then what you do afterwards. Because the goal of meditating is to tune in and to connect with yourself deeper, so that when you're showing up in reality and physical life, you're bringing that meditative state with you. It's not supposed to be separate from real life. As we practice meditation, we learn to meditate while we're walking, meditate while we're taking showers, meditate while we're in meetings. It's just, again, having an internal stillness and being able to connect with what you need to in that space, wherever that you are. So I would say for you, Maya, to take some time to really ask yourself why meditation leads to this isolation for you, Is that something that maybe unconsciously you're creating because you need more of a break, or you just don't want to be bothered with folks, or you just don't realize it? And then there are some steps to take, I think, when you're meditating as well, to set an intention beforehand. So if connection is what you want, maybe you set the intention and then you focus on that word, just connect during your meditation. And when you come out of that, you remember that that's a part of what it is that you desire to have.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maya. Let us know if that answered your question. And then we have another question here. After this, I want to ask you about that you don't want to be bothered with anybody kind of thing. Should we not feel guilt feel guilt about that? I think sometimes you just don't want to be bothered.
No, you don't.
Okay. So the next question comes from a LinkedIn user. It says, what about when you come from a culture or upbringing that doesn't know self-care? How does one develop their routine? Great question.
It is a great question. And I saw a meme the other day, and it was so poignant, so simple but poignant. And it was like, adulthood is growing up and recognizing that half of your family needs mental health help.
That's real.
Right. And I was like, wow, how true is that? I think for a lot of cultures, when we are talking about Black people around the world, right? We have not always had the luxury of taking care of ourselves. It was seen as something outside of our paradigm. So we really didn't even get to talk about what we were feeling. And now we're in this space where people are like, well, how do you feel? How do you feel? How does that connect? And it feels foreign because we weren't there. However, as an individual, you are always creating your life. And it's simply a matter of recognizing whether or not you have consciously or unconsciously created the state of your life right now. If the life that you're living and the results that you have are not in alignment with what you actually want, you get to recognize that some things need to change, and you can actively and consciously opt into self-care. And in doing so, I think you create a legacy for, right, those ancestors that came before you, because energy travels, and you get to be an example for those who are coming after you within that family. So it really is about you kind of picking up the flag and becoming like the heroine for the family. It's a lot of work, big responsibility, but somebody's got to do it.
Beautiful. And I think, that's so real. I just think having, because we family, right? You just be like, crazy aunt so-and-so, there could be a touch of mental illness there, not for nothing. And certainly that was a generation that, speaking as an African-American woman, a Black woman, you didn't go to the doctor unless you were quote unquote crazy. I'm not saying that for anyone. I believe in therapy, coaching, vision coach. I got all the coaches and all the things. My family's a self-care, expert. It's just, you have to surround yourself with that, but it's being honest. And I think doing an evaluation and understand, and for me, it has helped me to understand a lot of the behavior and other things where I don't hold maybe the way someone else responds to me or whatever the interactions are so much against them, especially in their older age. I'm talking about some of the elders in the family.
Right.
That you just realize, okay, there could be, even if it's not necessarily a mental health issue, but we're all carrying different kinds of baggage, would you say? Or as you said, that energy travels. And it's like you get to, which I think is so powerful. You can tell you've done the work, right? You get to make a change as opposed to you have to.
Absolutely. And I think it's important, just to kind of add on to that, it's important to ask where that comes from, right? So why is it that we don't get help? Why is it that we resist support? Because if we're talking about ancient society, indigenous cultures all over the world, that tribal lifestyle called for everyone to be supported. So is that even original to your culture? Or is it something that was maybe thrusted upon you based on oppression, right? So we need to ask those questions as well, so we can get back to our core values.
That's right. This American individualism, right? This, what are they, rugged individualism? And
Absolutely.
It's so interesting now. The times were interesting, and part of it, tragic, but the times that we're living in, I think, has helped many of us realize just how disconnected we all were. Now that you're missing, a lot of us are missing those connections and moving so fast. And I just think it's, the universe in so many different ways is showing the world is on fire. You can't go outside. It's just all these things. I'm like, listen, I tell people and it's just my opinion, obviously, we either all died at the end of 2019 or like, this is all a dream. This is like lost. This whole year is a
Right.
dream. None of this actually happened.
Yeah.
The end of the world was the end of 2019, or we have to change. I
We
just feel
have
like
to
the universe
change.
is like, I don't know what else to show you in order,
Mhm.
or we get to change, right?
We get to, and we have to in
We
this
get
case,
to, we
right?
have to, and we need to. Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So after this, I don't know. So I want to talk a little bit. Maya says, yeah, I'm guilty of that, just not wanting to be bothered. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Is it okay to sometimes just not want to be bothered? We talked about meditation and taking time for yourself. But, I think, again, for us, as many of us as Black women and women overall, you're doing all the things, you're working, you're taking care of the kids. Now a lot of folks are homeschooling their kids, which I know you do, and just all these different things. Is it okay to have a moment where you have healthy boundaries, I guess is what it is.
It's not only okay, but it's absolutely necessary and self-sustaining. Sometimes, right? If you feel like you don't want to be bothered all of the time, then that's an indication that there's some emotional or mental stress and strain occurring. But sometimes I look at my children and I say to them, beat it. That's it. And they're like, oh, okay, mommy needs a minute, right? And it doesn't offend them. It's not said from a place of anger or anything, but it's like, listen, not right now, beat it, okay? I'll come check on you when I'm done. And I had to learn how to get into a space where I felt comfortable doing that. It took time, it took work, took therapy, took coaching, took all of those things, took personal courage. But you absolutely have the right to take care of yourself, take time for yourself, and spend some time alone. One of the things that I think is dangerous and has caused us so much havoc over maybe like the past 10 to 15 years is that we're never really alone. Even when we're by ourselves, we're on our tablets, we're on our phones, we're watching television, right? So you don't want to be bothered sometimes with the people in your life because you don't even recognize how much time you're spending with the people on the internet or with the people wherever or the people at the job. So it takes a refocusing around, why is it that I don't want to be bothered? How can I create more intentional time and space for myself? And then how can I make my connections more impactful and substantial when we do come together?
That's so good. It's funny. My parents, as you know, down here in Atlanta, and I'm near them,
Yeah.
everybody 26 minutes away from them, which means they think they could call me to go to the store like I'm 12 years old and the store is up the street. I'm like, so that's a 3-hour trip, going and spending. But I was telling my vision coach this morning when I was talking to her, I had to create healthy boundaries there and just say, you know what, I'm not going to run back and forth during the week because, and when you're an entrepreneur and self-employed too, they're like, well, aren't you home?
Yeah, doing nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing.
It's like I work 14 hours a day. But anyway, God
Yeah.
bless them. But I had to say, you know what? I'm going to come on Saturdays, or we pick a day, whatever day. But like this week, it's Saturday. And we're going to spend the whole day together. I'm going to show you. My mom is always on the computer or the phone. She wants to know how to do. She has a newer iPhone than I do. She's doing all the things. And, she wants to know. I will spend the whole, so I won't be rushing and be thinking, oh, I got to go make a phone call in the closet. I got to figure out, it just makes me have more anxiety as opposed to your point, choosing how I spend time with them. It lets me have such a more meaningful and just being more present, which fulfills me more. And I'm sure makes them, because people can tell when you're kind of like, I really don't want to be here. I'm just here because of what have you, right? What do you think about, I noticed one of the things you said is being able to, personal courage of even being able to tell your kids, beat it, mommy needs a break. Do you feel like you had to even teach them over time how to be able to accept that? So it's not even just personal courage for you, but like me with my parents, you with your children, anyone else who has these interactions, you have to be courageous enough to teach other people how to treat you or how to accept when you need that space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had to have intentional conversations with both of my children. My son, Jaden, is 14. My daughter, Milani, is 8. So with Jaden, I think he understood a little more because he was like attached to dad's leg. You know what I mean? I'm mom when you need a meal or somebody to run to the school or whatever, like literally would walk past dad on the couch. Like, mom, can you make me a sandwich? You know what I mean?
And you're like, but
right, exactly. So he understood a little bit more, and I would have conversations, just say, Jaden, I need a minute. My daughter, on the other hand, it was a little bit more intense because I breastfed until she was like 2.5 years old. She had severe allergies when she was young, so she couldn't eat anything, which meant that she couldn't go to my mother-in-law's to babysit. So it was like she and I until she was maybe 3.5 to 4 years old. It was like just us. So I had to sit her down and have a conversation with her. And she's really emotionally sensitive, right? Not that she's a crybaby, but she feels a lot and she feels. So I had to sit her down and say, you know, sometimes mommy needs a break, right? Mommies work hard. Mommies do a lot of things. I'm mommy to you, but I'm also wife to daddy. I'm also daughter to granny. I'm also coach to my clients. I'm also these different things. So I play a lot of roles, and sometimes I really just need to rest. And we had maybe those conversations 2 or 3 times throughout her development. And now she will come in and say, like, Mom, you okay today? I see you've been doing a lot of work. You've been busy today. You're okay?
How do you not cry? It was like Auntie would be in tears.
And I'm like, no, I'm good. And she's like, you sure? You sure? Yeah. And I'm like, I'm good. Just before this meeting, and she's a straight shooter also. So she comes in the room and, you know, what are you doing? I'm getting ready for an interview. And she's like, oh, okay. And she gives me a hug. And she says, you know, she says to me, you know, and you don't have to have a skinny tummy. You're perfect just the way you are.
No. What? I didn't see that coming.
Right, me either.
Where did that come from?
I was like, what? Who's talking about tummies?
Little intuitive thing. Get out of here.
So, you know, it's just funny how she's always kind of tuning in when there's a little anxiety in the space. And now she'll make the space for me. So it's really good. I'll tell you who was harder than the kids. My mama.
The boundaries?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Same.
ma'am.
So what did you do?
We butt heads a little bit. And in that space, I had to be really firm and say, I'm not only your daughter anymore. Right? I'm an adult woman now also, and I have lots of responsibilities, and I cannot always come and do and stop everything just for you. It really would create anxiety for me. Like if my mom would call, it was like, what do I do? Right? I have 15 minutes until a coaching session. Should I take the call and try to do what she needs me to do in these 10 minutes? And then it got to the point where after a while, I just put the phone on do not disturb.
Right. I'll call you back.
It takes time and it takes practice. Yeah.
and I've heard with elderly, not even older, elderly parents, I've heard, what if it's an emergency? You should not be calling me first. Certainly, if it's an emergency, please call 911 and then call me or let me get the message and come meet you. Please. I am not the first call if it's an emergency. You know, and then we have to define emergencies.
Absolutely.
So we have a question here. Thank you all so much for the great questions. What do you do when people don't want to respect your boundaries? So you sort of talked about that you didn't say your mom doesn't respect your boundaries, but what do you do if you find that someone isn't able to accept it?
So you have to respect them, right? And when I say have to, I mean that you have to. There is no choice around it. So when you create a boundary for someone, you respect that boundary. And even if they don't want to respect it, it doesn't impact you the same way because you're respecting it. So eventually they will understand and recognize, okay, Fila said that she doesn't take calls after 7. And I keep calling her at 7:30 and 8 and she doesn't pick up. And then she sent me a text message and she said, don't call me after 7. Right? So they'll get hit and then they'll start calling you before 7. Sometimes it takes just repetitive action. Other times it takes that intentional conversation. And I think a lot of times we're afraid to confront people in our lives and say what we feel, which then has a negative impact on our entire emotional, energetic field, right? Because you are swallowing your own emotions, and that only does further damage to you. So you want to make sure that you respect your boundaries, that you commit to those boundaries, and that if someone feels like they cannot respect it, they don't want to abide by it, you get to have a direct conversation with them. And then you can go from there, right? When you create boundaries, you lose people. And that's something that we don't always recognize when we're saying, you know what, I still want to continue this relationship, but I just kind of want to shift the way that it's happening. That's not always beneficial for the other person. you not having any boundaries benefits them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whenever they can come to you, call you, take from you, that creates benefit for them. So when you start saying, I'm taking back some of my time, I'm taking back some of my energy, and I'm not going to deplete myself for you anymore, sometimes you will lose relationships, and you have to be willing to do that so that you can move on and feel better. And so really respecting your own boundaries and committing to them is the only way to have people respect them and abide by them.
So in other words, it sounds like people have to realize that you're serious about the boundary, right? So not even just so much I have to, she says this, so I have to respect. Otherwise, it's how what you're communicating through your action. Are you respecting the boundary? As you said, are you taking it seriously? So she seriously means she's really not going to pick up the phone after 7.
Right.
Sometimes people don't believe your boundary until you show them over and over again. No, I'm serious. I'm not going to pick up or whatever it is, right?
Right, right. Absolutely. Like at home, everybody calls me Trina because that's my middle name.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking to an auntie the other day, and she says, "Oh yeah, I was talking to your mom." And I said, "Oh, well, did you tell Trina?" And she said, "Your mom was like, oh no, she doesn't listen to this kind of stuff." I said, "Oh, I'm glad she knows, and she's telling the rest of y'all."
Right.
No gossip, no drama, no none of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone eventually gets on board, and then they don't even come to your space with the things that you don't want anymore.
So this person says, I need to implement that. I'm assuming all the things you just mentioned about boundaries. So let's talk about that for a second. So how do we, we say, you mentioned have the intentional conversations and, have the courage to tell people what you need and those kind of things.
Mhm.
Should we say, take our sacred self-care journal and should we write some of these things out, just like these are the things that I need to take care of myself or create space for myself or to have my mommy doesn't want to be bothered time? Are there things that you recommend that we do say before we have those conversations?
Absolutely, because often we don't know what boundaries we need to set.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You may just realize that you're more tired or depleted or angry at certain points in the day, or after you've had certain interactions. So it's always about becoming aware of how certain people and relationships impact your emotions and impact your behavior. And then that's why I say when you journal, it's so powerful because there are things going on internally that you have no idea about because you're off living and doing and being. And so when you just start writing things down about how you're feeling or your day, you'll be able to pinpoint like, oh, I did feel that way after this thing, right? Or after the meeting, I felt this kind of way. I kind of always feel like that after those meetings. Who was in that meeting or what happened there? Then you get to see that you need to create certain boundaries. Like for a really quick example, I have a client who works in the racial justice sector. Mm-hmm. And she's one of a few Black women in her industry and in her office. And so during so many of the sessions, she realized how depleted she would be after like having meetings with the team. And I said, well, that's because you're going in there and you're being the magical Negro. You're coming to solve all the problems, right? You're the racial justice fairy now, sprinkling fairy dust on everyone else to explain everything to them, to give them the solutions, to tell them what not to do and all that. And you're not leaving any room. And she said, you know what? You're right. Because I've noticed that now everybody looks to me to like contribute in the space. She's like, even when I don't feel like it. Right. And so she had to say to everyone, listen, we're all a part of this. Like, I get that I'm the only Black girl here, but this has to be a partnership in order for this to really work in real life. I'll contribute when I have something substantial to say, but if I am not contributing, I ain't got nothing to say right now.
Right.
And they were like, oh, okay, no problem. So sometimes people will respect your boundary as soon as you create it because they don't recognize they're overstepping. And other times you really have to be clear about what it is that you want to create more of in your life or to take out, have less of. And journaling allows you to get that down on paper and really see that. That was kind of long-winded. Did that answer the question?
No, okay. It was excellent. And it's funny, I'm thinking about girlfriends that I have who work in the corporate sector who are not in racial justice, not in diversity and inclusion or anything. They're just Black women at the office or the only Black VP or the only what have you. But now all of a sudden they're basically the head of diversity.
Yeah.
Also, and I said, not even, and I'm like, I know it's annoying, but also you need to have that conversation because there are people who get paid handsomely to do that.
Absolutely.
That is a job. That is
Yeah.
something that, so having those conversations, which, in the beginning, everyone was kind of feeling their way. And by beginning, I mean, when the, racial reckonings or social injustice
Right.
kind of rallies and things started happening. But at this point, it's like, listen, either the company is serious about this and you're going to hire a person, you're going to give me a raise. So when you ask me this question, I know why I'm answering it. Or I, just like you said, I can't be that person every day,
Right.
just because I'm the Black woman at the table or what the Black man in the office or this corner of the office or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I think to your point of us making up, deciding our own boundaries or deciding what we need more of or less of.
Absolutely.
And I think too, another thing for everyone to catch, or I certainly caught this, not only taking inventory, say, of this meeting, like say you've been saying all along, oh, I hate the Tuesday staff meeting. Is it the staff meeting, or do you need to take note of who is in the meeting?
Right.
It might be something more about the energy of certain folks, and not necessarily anything wrong with them. Let me know if I'm saying any of this wrong. Anything wrong with that person, but it just might be that energy from that person or that interaction or whatever it is exhausting for you.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely on point. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
agree totally.
anybody have any other questions? Thank you all so much for being so engaged. This is fantastic. I could go on forever and ever, but I don't want Fila to tell me she's over me and I got to go sit down for it.
No.
So tell everyone before you go where they can get in touch with you, where they can find out more about you, your website. Again, I'll drop all of the links here. And for the podcast folks later on, it'll be in the show notes on the podcast. And we just want to know more about how we can find you.
Sure. So, of course, you can go to the website, filaantwine.com. That's Fila, FILA, ANTWINE.com. In the social stratosphere, of course, my platform of choice is Instagram, where you can see everything from my work to my kids to my marriage to all of that kind of stuff. And it's at She Is Fila across all social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Excellent.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yes, Fila, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
My pleasure.
Hopefully, I'm not going to say I hope you know how much I love you.
Oh, I do. And like the feeling is so mutual.
Yes, and so proud of you and just seeing, all that you're creating and this work that you're doing and everyone she is. Please follow her, especially everywhere, but especially on Instagram so you can see just how she's showing up really for women in all of these different ways. Today, we just talked about the journal and the cards, but there are a lot of other options. I know you have a course too, right?
I do. I have an online course, Sacred Self-Care Made Simple. So, and I'm actually hosting a free webinar tomorrow. So anyone who comes tomorrow, it's at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard. No, it's at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. So you can register for that, RSVP for free at my Instagram as well.
Okay, excellent. All right. So everyone, thank you so much. Someone said thank you, ladies. Thank you. Fila,
thank you
so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.